Thank you. Wow. We're popular. Well, it's not me that you're here for, but really quick intro. My name is Jordan French. Very much at large on the editorial staff at TheStreet.com, and also in Grit Daily News, champion of live journalism in New York. Where are they with me? Wonderful. I'm going to, without delay, introduce my lovely guests. Awesome topic that I want to talk about. Rick Bleszynski's with us. Come on over here, and you can clap for him. Come on over. I'm going to give you a seat. Make sure we have enough of them. And you want to come around here? Stephen Becker, MakerDAO, is with us. I'll pop you right there. And where's Pooja Shah?
Getting mic'd up.
Where did Pooja go?
Getting mic'd.
Oh, she's getting mic'd up. Well, we won't start without you, Pooja. And last but not least, Pooja Shah is here with us. I'm going to seat you right here. Thanks so much, Pooja. And your founder, Protocol Labs for the uninitiated, that's Juan Bennett, made a video that we thought actually encapsulated a bit of some of the excitement and challenges, really, that we see. I have a clicker. It makes me feel a bit like a Bond villain. I'm going to press this button and hope nothing bad happens now. It's a green button. I'm pressing it. And we'll see if this plays.
Thank you, Robin, for inviting me to join you today at Digital Money Forum at CES 2020. I wish I could be there in person. I'm sorry. I'm hunkered down with the team building the next release of Filecoin, the mainnet. Pooja will share more about this in the next session. Filecoin aims to solve a fundamental problem in today's web. Where are we going to store all the data we're generating? By the end of this year, there will be about 50 zettabytes of data in the world. And the amount we're generating every year is growing exponentially. Tons of news, videos, podcasts, websites, all kinds of files. But about half of the world's storage sits unused. Filecoin is a cryptocurrency-powered storage network. Storage providers earn Filecoin by offering unused storage space. And users spend Filecoin to hire that storage space in the network. Crypto is the incentive layer that makes the system operate like a marketplace. Protocol Labs is part of the Web3 movement, the next generation of the internet. This is a web that's more resilient, reliable, and open. It's a return to the original intent of the internet. Protocol Labs and everyone working on Web3 are building a new and much-needed internet infrastructure. This is an ecosystem of protocols that decentralize the web, that democratize access to services, and spread the wealth created by networks. Anyone can be a part of it, so we hope you'll join us.
Well, thanks, Juan. Juan shared with us that he couldn't be here. He apologized. So first, Juan, we do accept your apology, Juan. And we're glad that you sent someone that your team claimed was better, and that's Pooja Shah. So I'm going to open with you, and it's on everyone's mind, Pooja, because we're impatient people. Nowadays, our attention spans are short. We think everything should happen all at once. But inquiring minds do want to know, is there a particular Achilles heel that could hobble blockchain entirely and make all of this cacophony we've made about how much promise it holds not quite significant?
Yeah, I think that's a great question to begin with. My perspective, obviously, I'm biased, I work in this space, but I believe that the answer is no. There isn't an Achilles heel. We're just at a stage in development in this industry where we're still building core infrastructure. So as an example, with Filecoin, what we're building, as Juan mentioned in the video, is a decentralized storage network. If you think of a tech stack, like the way that we think of building a computer, storage is one of the core components, along with compute and operating systems and some of these core base layers of computation that we're still, people at the forefront of this industry are still building those core infrastructural layers. And we're not at the stage yet where we're going to see these mass market applications that make blockchain adopted really broadly, because we're still building core infrastructure. So I don't think that there is an Achilles heel. I think we're just at a really low level part of it.
You mentioned these applications, but the people demand them. But I'm going to breathe a sigh of relief since you said we're not doomed. I'll set my detonator down on this table gently and carefully, and toss this to Rick. For the uninitiated, Rick, you had a very significant role in building what we now know as the internet. And the reason why that's important here is because it's very relatable to this audience. Everyone kind of knows what email is and a web browser is, for example. But as it relates to blockchain, there are perhaps a few analogies there. So just give us some perspective from what Pooja refers to as these grand applications, and she says they're coming. Where are we in the timeline for blockchain when we have in our minds the internet?
Okay. I want to continue from what Juan Bennett was mentioning earlier with regards to this is changing from a centralized to a decentralized fashion. And he's creating, I think one of the most brilliant infrastructure, starting with the IPFS and then moving to the protocol apps and stuff like that. So if you look at the, you really have to look at the layering protocols in the blockchain space and compare it to the internet OSI 7 layers, okay? So, we spend a lot of time in layer 1, layer 2, application layers on the top, on the blockchain side, and then, in fact, I think some of the thing that Protocol Apps is working is actually some of the P2P layers, some of the protocols right there that you guys are defining right there, right? Now, that is great. I mean, you have to look at every single layers and map it to the OSI 7 layer structures. So we are down to already lower than layer 1. That's what they're working in. Now, I combine that P2P layers and below as layer 0 in blockchain space today. And layer 0 involves 0 through 4 in the OSI internet layers. So you need to map that and really take a look carefully. How do you solve this for mass adoptions? A lot of work have been done on the applications, protocol layers, consensus layers, P2P layers, but we're still running on the basic TCP/IP, internet, routing, switching, optical layers that was built 40 years ago.
So I'm going to repeat this back to you too. So it sounds like blockchain largely being built on this old infrastructure technology. A lot of it's hardware. Yeah. Some of the stuff that you worked on, or at least certainly got patents in years ago, and it's inadequate for all this mushroom of opportunities, applications, and so on that Pooja referred to. Is that the gist of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the gist of it, and I can give a very simple application. It's not even an entire layering. It's just one application that came in maybe a decade ago. It's called Netflix. And it really throws the internet out of the, it's like the internet couldn't handle Netflix, okay? So then some people create what it's called the content delivery network and trying to solve how to stream Netflix to all of us, right? So there is no Achilles heels. Yes, there is a solution, but we're still all working for that right now. Yeah.
And Stephen, I want to bring you into this, given sort of like where we are and the community I hear from as a journalist is quite underwhelmed. It's a good way to describe it. So to invert all of this, what can we do? And what have we done that is something that the community can point to in blockchain that says, we're on our way?
From that point of view, I'd like to try and just sort of put my hand down and bring us back up to some level of simplicity and ask a very broad question, and that is, what is the purpose of blockchain anyway? From my point of view, the internet was really global accessibility to information. Blockchain is global accessibility to value. So we've got to have a look at the community and the consumers and say, well, what do we need to have in place from a technical point of view in order to achieve that global accessibility to value? So in being able to do that, you can start identifying what those technical hurdles are. So from my standpoint, then, it is really the feedback mechanism between the blockchain infrastructure that you're building and the use cases, the user experience that you have. It can't be too far apart, because if it is, it just becomes a theoretical exercise. You don't get that usability, you don't get that progress and momentum behind it. So from the community point of view, it really is taking that global accessibility of value and turning it into the necessary products. Exchanges, centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges, like Coinbase, OKX. You've got decentralized exchanges out there, 0x and Oasis. Very clear expressions of how you can bring value to the users through the intersection of blockchain and what I like to call the analog world, because really it's at that intersection where you get that value and you realize the underlying purpose.
Yeah, certainly. And I think there's a bit of a theoretical element, though, to what you're describing. And as it relates back to technical hurdles, it begs the question, can we do all of those things successfully that you just described?
Well, that remains to be seen to a certain extent. I mean, everything is really a case of a function of time and effort and making sure that you can adapt appropriately to the user's needs. If it really boils down to being incredibly smart and creating these protocols that allow the accessibility to new applications, new decentralized applications, then it bodes well to make sure that those applications are also made, that the user experience with those applications are very tangible and manifests clearly into value. So ultimately, that relationship it's a bit of a loop, but you need to make sure that one doesn't go too far ahead of the user and their experience.
Certainly, and Pooja, 3 times Stephen mentioned the word value. Well, for your user out there of really anything, especially perhaps transactional, there are a few things that logically one would require for such a system any system to work, specifically for pedestrian terms we'll use them, speed of any system, certainly, right? And then scalability of that, because you can do something quickly, if you can't repeat it over and over, that's an issue. And then categorically security, and we'll really launch into that in a bit. And that helps us architect a bit about what we're talking about. But where are we on the first 2 of those categorically?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what application of blockchain you're talking about. So we have decentralized finance projects. There are decentralized compute projects like Ethereum. And then I work in the decentralized storage space, so Filecoin is a decentralized storage project. There are, just like with any software development project, there are core market and product needs that we treat as requirements when we're trying to navigate this trade-off space of security, scalability, and speed. And particularly in our case, when we talk about speed, it's retrieval speed. So how quickly, if you're going to store a file on the Filecoin network, how quickly can you get it back, which is just a core function of storage of data. And so when we're thinking about this trade-off space, we use the requirements that we have from a product and market perspective to say that these are possible protocol designs that we can use as we're building this system and implementing it and then launching it to the world and allowing other people to interact with it. But the honest answer is that there isn't a perfect solution to getting exactly what you want from all 3 of these dimensions: security, scalability, and speed. I'm sure every project in the space faces a similar problem of navigating the trade-offs between these 3 dimensions.
Yes. So let's go back to the analogy again, right? Speed, scalability. Okay. Back before the browser was came out in the mid-90s, you see only engineers, scientists, they were able to use the internet. But internet already existed 20 years before that, right? But it was never open to the public because it was so difficult to use. And what happened when Netscape came out, Internet Explorers come out, all of a sudden, shortly thereafter, you have all these killer apps coming, the Google, the Amazon, the Facebooks, the social media. But what happened to the actual infrastructures? The speed of the internet from the 90s to the 2000s, specifically the wide area network, it grows tremendously. We are going from 100 meg to 1 gig to 10 gig to 100 gig and so forth, right? So the same thing is going to happen right now with this new layering that I keep referring to, from the blockchain. We are making new upper layers, protocols, consensus. Complexity is enormous. Encryptions, we're not even, we didn't even get to that yet, right? I mean, this is an enormous complexity. So we have to look again at every single layers, and I think Protocol Labs is really heavily looking at some of the middle layers right here, which is below the consensus and the protocol up there for the decentralized storage. But we have to go all the way. We have to look at all the layers, all the way down, to the processor level, exactly.
And Rick, this harkens back to last year's debate at CS. For those who were here and forgot, or those who weren't, the $64,000 question was, are we at that Netscape browser for blockchain? And that was the debate. To tease that out, that idiom or the analog even more, in your view, I understand, we have the email of blockchain. What is the email of blockchain, if you will, Rick?
So the email is basically creating the mass adoptions of the internet users. It took about 15, 20 years for email to create the mass adoptions. Bitcoin similarity in the crypto and blockchain space, creating the mass adoptions for the crypto and blockchain space. Now, have we seen, this is again the 64,000, have we seen the Netscape in this blockchain space? And I think there are numerous projects out there, and I cannot say which specifically one that is, I can make an analogy to the Netscape, whether it's Filecoin, whether it's EOS, whether it's a Maker or IBA, which is our integrated blockchain architecture, right? But a lot of companies from all over the world are working on it. But what I can say this time than the last time back in the 95, 96 when the browser came out, it took 5, 6, 7 years for the killer apps to come. What I can say this time, we are in the digital era. When that browser or the analogy in blockchain come out, you better be prepared because it's going to go much faster, the adoption, because we are living in a digital era today.
Well, and I'll position this towards Stephen. You mentioned EOS. I was listening. We were all listening. So it's fair game now. Brock Pierce last year at CES offered that up as the Netscape browser. How has that panned out in your view, Stephen?
Well, that's interesting. I think a lot of the protocols have found their way through the crypto winter, and they're trying to figure out how to reposition themselves appropriately. But more importantly, it is looking at what applications are becoming available to users and what applications are being meaningful. I refer back to global accessibility of value. I'm talking about financial inclusion. I'm talking about accessibility to everyone around the world to value. And that's where, at the Maker Foundation, the protocol that's been developed and put on top of the Ethereum blockchain, the sole product of it ultimately is a stable coin. Because if you have value, you want to be able to transact in value, and you want to do so without volatility. It's that simple. It is the creation of digital cash in a decentralized world that makes it immutable, transparent, and effective and secure. And to that end, when you have a look at the question you brought up about, what's the killer app, what's the Netflix, is it EOS? It remains to be seen because from my point of view, it's not just one. It's going to be the realization of the combination of many. It's the partnerships and the collaborations between the Filecoins and the Makers. There's an established value proposition right there. There's the ability to have a look at point of sales. There's PundiX, who created a card where you can load up DAI, the stablecoin that Makers produced, and use it effectively pretty much anywhere you wish. So the intersection of this crypto blockchain space with the real world is becoming more manifest. It's really bringing proper value to everyone around the world. And that is really essential. And how we bring this ecosystem together will dictate how blockchain as a whole moves forward.
And just a little bit of housekeeping, because we're around the 10-minute mark. Love participation from the audience, so around the 5-minute mark or so, we'll definitely have a walking mic. You can ask some questions for awesome panelists. Right back to it, I do want to drill down just a bit on this. Most people, I think, here know what MakerDAO is, but for the uninitiated, best known for its stable coin. A lot of people want to know, why did you start there?
What I start with the
stable coins, yes.
Well, here's the interesting part about this, that it's a little bit nuanced, but the stable coin is effectively a byproduct of MakerDAO. What is really important is the fact that this application provides two financial primitives, and those primitives are at the heart of most economic systems, that being collateralization and credit generation. So from there, it provides a set of tools for folks to be able to create insurance products, financial products, loan products. You can even look at supply chain management and say, how do you create supply chain financing around that? It opens capital structuring. You got a new company, you want to raise funds. What kind of working capital do you want to get? Do you go to a bank, or do you go to a newly defined application built on the Ethereum network? It gives you a span of possibility where true value can actually be realized right now. And because you can realize that value, you start looking at the simple aspect of how can you take this forward? Well, you have to answer the question for the application, but you also have to answer the question for the blockchain that you're sitting on and where that blockchain sits on. And this goes back to Rick's point about looking at all those layers and saying, well, how does this thing really grow to global adoption?
Rick, did you want to weigh in? Otherwise, I'll go to Pooja.
Again, right, like I just wanted to, I hope I'm not repeating myself, right? This is, again, part of the infrastructure that the Maker is working, and then at the same time, Filecoin is also working Protocol Labs into some part of the other infrastructure. He's at the higher layer, and she's at this middle layers. But, we really need, like I said, when the Netscape come, it's going to be so fast. And the whole stack of this layer better be prepared for that.
Well, it almost sounds like a warning. Is there something in mind that you want to share now?
That's why we're working on it. Right?
Okay.
So there's layer 1, layer 2. There's the P2P layers. There's the application layers. But there's this layer 0 too. That it has to be prepared.
Okay. Well, let's get back to that in just a bit. And I also want to talk about security because it's a big issue. It's also on everyone's mind. Pooja, I'm not letting you off the hook, though, from the very first question you offered up. Like the applications are coming, just pointedly. When? Give us an idea of what's in your head, from your point of view, in this paradigm that we've shared in its analogy to the internet.
Yeah, okay, so let's see, mass market applications. Is that what we're talking about?
That's what you offered up in the first question.
That is what I offered up,
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I think over the next few years, I think I'm talking on the order of 5-ish years, we're still going to be in this place where we're continuing to build the core infrastructure. A lot of the projects in the space right now are trying to provide similar value proposition to projects like Ethereum, but they're playing with these other dimensions that we talked about already, so scalability and speed and things like this. Those projects, many of them haven't even launched. Once they do, we'll see how well they work, but there might be also a host of other problems that we discover come up because of these new projects that have launched. And I think in the decentralized storage space, it's even earlier. So I think for the next 5 years, we're still going to see a lot of iteration on what these core infrastructure blockchains look like, sort of the layer 0/1 blockchains. And I think once we have a good handle on these systems that can support transactions and applications at scale, we will start to see more of those applications that have, now they differentiate themselves on things like UX, how easy is this application to use, and more vertical, targeted to specific verticals. But we need the core infrastructure to support that, which I honestly don't think exists today. So I'd say, it's really hard to put times on anything like this, but for the next several years, I think we're still going to be building basic building blocks, and then we'll start to see applications after that.
We've also pointed out a few, and I do want to go to you and Rick this. Sure. I know you have a comment there, and we did just pull out of Stephen, some of these use cases. There's a really interesting one at DoD, but I want to get your comment in first.
Yes. So, the usual encryption that's been used by banking, financial system, and stuff like that, it's very, it's secure enough. It's the AES, and then we move to this very sophisticated, much more complex encryptions, using the SHA-256 for the proof of work of, some of this consensus algorithm, right? And that is a very compute-intensive algorithms. So if you think about it, right, we are creating the global network of trust, which is, this is blockchain, this decentralized mechanism. So we need some very sophisticated encryption, which is the SHA-256. So if you really think about it, prior to Bitcoin, who was the largest user of public-private key cryptography, which is the SHA-256? I believe it was the DoD, the Department of Defense. So if If it's good enough for them, I think for the next couple of decades, it's good enough for creating the global network of trust for the mass adoption of this. Right?
Well, Rick asked a question. Steve, do you want to answer it? If it is good enough, why aren't if it's good enough for DoD, why aren't we all using it?
Well, this comes back to that sort of vicious cycle of creating the technology and then getting the users. It takes time. Really, along with most of the tech space is an evolutionary aspect to it, and we have to take this through a time frame in order to realize it as quickly as possible. And to the point of security as well, it's not just looking at the protocol and looking at the blockchain and understanding that private-public key encryption, but you come all the way up to the application layers. These applications that we're building on chains are like satellites. Once you've deployed them on a public blockchain, you can't just go, oh, I made a mistake, I need to bring it back, it's gone. So the next steps involved with security at those levels need to be considered. And there's something called formal verification, something that's used in the airline industry, where before they actually create the aircraft, they formally prove that it's going to do what it's supposed to do. The same thing is applied specifically to the Maker protocol. Formal verification has been used to ensure it's going to do what we expect it to do. And then above that, you have your security audits and your bug bounties and all the necessary infrastructure in place and audits in place to make sure that you have a holistic security from the protocol all the way up to the application level. And why? It induces confidence. And why is that? Because that's inherent in all the value that you want to extract from a blockchain application.
And its root, you use the word confidence. At its root, that seems to be a challenge. It sounds like there's information asymmetry everywhere out there as it relates to every aspect of this, though, including security. You even offered up a mutual funds analogy. That's
1927, the mutual funds were invented, and for the next year and a half, everybody thought it was a scam. So, it really is a case of getting traction behind a very good concept until eventually it becomes very clear as to what the purpose is and how it actually provides that purpose apparent. So from the blockchain perspective, the same thing is really happening. When you look at the general news items out there about Bitcoin, it's generally from a negative point of view. Because that's the way, sorry to say this, but you sell papers, as it were. But on the flip side...
It is how we sell.
Is it? Okay, I'm great. I wasn't sure about that. So on the flip side, it really is also looking at an application that is useful. It generally is a case in most newly defined markets, speculators come first. Speculators, nefarious actors come first, and from that you build out the true value of something inherent.
Rick, I'll give you the last word now. We definitely want to make sure we can probably fit in a question or two.
Okay. The message I'm saying right here is that if this were to be as huge as the internet, as huge as I'm going to refer to a graphics processing, we have to create a special processors for the internet. We have to create a special processor for the graphic. We have to create a special processors for the mobile devices, right? Perhaps we have to create a special processor for blockchain.
Quite the history lesson here, too. I do want to go to questions. I do see some hand raised. I believe we have a walking mic. I'm going to look for who's got it. And can we get one right up here? We'll go to the gal up front in the red. And we'll have to make it quick. And say your name.
Hi, my name is Michelle. In the future, 50 years from now, how do you think decentralized internet will look like? Will it be a few companies monopolizing us, one company having our data? And how would inclusion look like with AI and other technology?
Want to take that one, Pooja?
Sure. I think that's a great question. You bring up some particularly salient things, I think, in this space, especially when thinking about data privacy, right? I think this is a core value that is inherent to Web3. And when we think about upgrading the infrastructure of the internet, how do we do that? How do we give control and sovereignty back to people who are providing data online to begin with, right? I think in 50 years, I really hope we see a system that has that as an inherent feature where people do control their own data. It is truly decentralized in the most absolute of cases. And I think to the first part of your question about whether it looks like there are a couple of central institutions that play the overwhelming role, I think that it's really difficult for that to be the case if we do our jobs correctly, because what we build is protocols and networks, and then once they are sort of launched, to use the satellite analogy, or it's like launching a software rocket, once we've launched them, we no longer control them. So, gets into how do we govern the evolution of these protocols over time. But if we're doing our jobs right, hopefully these networks will exist autonomously, and there won't be central institutions that govern them and control them.
Well, that's all the time that we have. It sounds like a warning shot, though, at centralized institutions. You're launching rockets at them. That's what I got out of what you just said. Like I said, my name is Jordan French. Please join me in thanking our awesome panelists. We know they're super busy, working on a lot of things. Pooja Shah, Bleszynski, Stephen Becker. I'm Jordan French. Until next time.